Happy New Year, feral friends and fellow nature nerds. Thank you for tuning in to this very first Dirt Dispatch of 2025, Dirt Dispatch number 19. I'm your host, Tim the Nature Nerd O'Hara. So a few final nature observations from last year, 2024, which sounds funny to say. Just a couple of things I saw right at the end of the year. One was I went out hiking just before the winter break. My wife was out of town. My kids were in school, and I went out to a spot that kind of not very known, not very well traveled. It's not a lot of people out there, and I started hiking, and we'd gotten about half an inch of snow overnight, and it was kind of windy. It was blowing around. But I noticed as I started my hike, mountain lion tracks on the trail, and it made me very, very aware that I had failed to do one of the primary things that you're supposed to do when you go out hiking or biking alone, and that's let somebody know where you're going, which I had not done because it was kind of a spur of the moment decision. So I fortunately, the tracks seemed to be going the opposite direction that I was planning to go, but I became very aware of my surroundings. I stopped frequently to look behind me. I was talking out loud quite a bit to myself. I don't carry a gun or anything like that. I usually carry a small pocket knife. I did pick up a stick. So just a reminder as we head into the new year to be safe out there, because one of the things that occurred to me was, had there not been snow on the ground, that cat still would have been there and I never would have known it. So it's important to be aware of that. But it was really cool to see the tracks. You can tell mountain lion tracks because they don't have claw marks like a dog would, and it was about the size of the palm of my hand. So pretty cool. The other thing that I've seen recently is there's a pair of bald eagles that have been hanging around the two small lakes that are not far from my house here on base in Wyoming. So I've seen them a couple days in a row now. And I think one of the reasons they're hanging around, one, we still have open water. Eagles are partially migratory. They subsist, almost half of their diet is fish. So they really need that open water, and they'll migrate as far south as they need to find open water generally. In this case, we do have some open water. The lakes are partially frozen. And on one of the lakes, there is actually a dead deer, and it's kind of out, not in the middle, but pretty far from shore, maybe 30, 40 feet from shore, close to shore. It's not frozen. And there's a carcass laying out there, which is interesting because it's a mystery what happened. Did it get hit by a car? It's kind of far from the main road. So maybe it got hit by a car and was just injured and made it out to the ice before it collapsed. Or maybe something else happened to it. But the crows and the magpies are making short work of it. There's quite a few crows and magpies that are scavenging on that carcass. The eagles are probably also scavenging on that carcass. And even in just the last 24 hours, there's a noticeable difference in what's left and what's remaining. And maybe the coyotes got out there overnight. They can probably get out there on the ice, whereas you or I would fall through. So it's just an interesting process to witness. And a carcass like that this time of year would be quite a valuable source of energy. It's been fairly cold and windy, not too terrible. But for birds and things like that, this would be a more difficult time of year to find high quality sources of protein and energy and things like that. So like I said, the crows and the magpies have really been flocking out there and taking advantage of that carcass and reducing it quite a bit. So the last thing I want to talk about today is we're heading into 2025. Now, I don't really do New Year's resolutions per se, but I do have some goals moving forward for Dispatches from the Forest. I do want to do a webinar, so keep an eye out for that, because maybe towards the end of January, I would like to do a webinar on, of course, one of my favorite subjects, coyotes. Like I said, I don't always fight with strangers on the internet. When I do, it's usually about coyotes. So I think for my first webinar, what I really want to do is kind of a coyote myth busting type of webinar. So that'll probably be sort of a lunch and learn, maybe on a Friday, and with a nominal cost, maybe $5. So if you're a Patreon subscriber, if you're one of my patrons, you would get that link to the webinar for free. And if you register for the webinar, even if you can't attend live, I will provide a link to the recording of the webinar that you can watch at your convenience. So keep an eye out for that. I'm not trying to make a lot of money on the webinar, but I do have a Zoom subscription. So what I'd like to do is offer maybe once a month or once every couple of months a webinar for a nominal fee, and just hopefully just break even on my Zoom subscription. That's my goal. The other thing that I'm going to try to do is get myself more organized in the new year, and maybe have some guests on the podcast. We get some interviews going. I've had some suggestions for the city forester here in Cheyenne, some of the Department of Fish and Wildlife people, or the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, who does the black-footed ferret captive breeding and release here on the base. So I thought that would be interesting, then a little bit different than hearing me yammer all the time. So look forward to that in the new year. I hope you're having a great new year. I hope you had a happy holiday season. If you want to support the podcast, you can do that by becoming a patron. And like I said, that will get you access to any webinars that I offer. You can find out all that information by going to patreon.com/dispatches from the forest. You can also donate via PayPal using my email address. That's dispatchesfromtheforest@gmail.com. You can use that email address to contact me if you have a question or a comment or a suggestion for a future episode. I'm always in the market for suggestions for future episodes. Let me know what you want to learn about. You can make a one-time donation also via the Cash App, and my cash tag on there is ForestNerd. So you can do that. You can also check out the merch store. That can be found at cafepress.com/shop/dispatches from the forest. Click on products and you'll see everything there is to offer. Only thing left to say for the first time in 2025 is I'm your host, Tim the Nature Nerd O'Hara, reminding you to go outside and get dirty. Dirt Dispatches is a production of Dispatches from the Forest and may not be used or rebroadcast whole or in part without express written permission.